This is a recorded presentation from the American Occupational Therapy Association Inspire Conference in Kansas City, Missouri, held in April of 2023.
Well, after I got over the shock of my son's criminal action, my younger son, and thankfully I was in the dissertation process, which kept me focused. We OTTIS, we adapt. My son was the inspiration for developing this model for reentry. And I thought back to earlier days, why this model would be good. If you've worked in acute or any other kind of care, we would never think of discharging a person without preparation. And yet, our criminal justice system not only doesn't prepare people, but it dehumanizes their personhood, I would say. I want to thank Lisa Jaegers for being the real lead in the effort in this program, and then Mackenzie, who is boots on the ground doing staff work currently, so you're going to hear from both of those. This model, you will hear much more about our occupational therapy transition and integration services, but I always envisioned it as an interprofessional effort, because we don't work in an isolated manner. You cannot do this work in isolation totally. There are many challenges and facilitators to this work. Dr. Jaegers will be talking about the transition and integration services, and I didn't give credit to Christine Hayes-Picker, was really our boots on the ground for 5 years. And she would start with baseline assessment these were with what are called JLWOPs, the juveniles who were sentenced to life without the option of parole. The U.S. Supreme Court overturned that and made it possible to prepare people after they have served 24 years to re-enter society. But as you can imagine, there is no way they are prepared for life on the outside. They not only have experienced a very dehumanizing experience during their incarceration, but they know nothing of the technology we use, even how to use a credit card or a debit card. So very, very, very complex process. The model that this is built on is one that I conceptualized. You see very familiar constructs there. PEO and P, but they're framed differently. So what possibilities or options does this person have connected with their context, their environment, and their personal strengths and weaknesses? The work on their performance patterns and participation is done by our staff, who work with these people, baseline assessments, and then often telehealth if they're at a distant prison. But health-related quality of life is really what we're after. And that's a health services research construct which is used widely in that realm.
Awesome. Thanks, Karen. Thank you so much. And Karen is the visionary behind this program. She is the reason why we have OTTIS. She's the reason why we have even done this work at St. Louis University. In 2014, when I came to SLU, Karen was already had the model that she showed you, that PEOP model that was adjusted and modified for this type of work. And because of her lived experience with a family member and just true passion for knowing that occupation is so necessary for people in criminal justice systems, she forged through and really created a lot of the partnerships that I'll talk about. So what does OTTIS do? What we do is we learn about a person's interests and abilities to do daily activities and occupations. So as any OT does with any client, we initially start with that occupational profile. We try to understand what are their interests, which directions are we going to be moving in. And then ultimately, the interventions that I think are so distinct for OT to be doing them as compared to other professions is that they are very tailored interventions based on that occupational profile and also many, many assessment tools. So we have a full gamut of assessment tools to look at that person's abilities. And then we provide specific adaptation and education by walking with the person through their journey, pre and post release. And when I say we, I'll talk about our team later. It's not me. It's people like Mackenzie and Christine Hayes-Picker and others who are doing that work. But what's so important is the way that we try to do it. We're not gonna make the assumption that we know exactly what they should be doing and how they should be doing it. We're gonna kind of take their lead and go with it. And in our program currently working with people with cognitive challenges, that has been the ultimate challenge to really understand which direction are they walking and how do we need to shift and adjust. And it takes a lot of an iterative process to learn from them and then make those very skilled OT suggestions to cue them and help walk with them. So we also connect people with community resources and direct linkages, and I'll talk about some of those as well. So we use AOTA practice frameworks and such, thinking about advocacy, our roles as consultants, our roles as direct care practitioners, and so on. So I'm going to turn it over to Mackenzie, and she'll be talking more about her work.
All right, so this is just one of our articles that we have published on JBot, so feel free to check that out if you wish. All right, so the methods that we've used, our design is we performed an exploratory process evaluation study of the OTTIS program from the past 4.5 years. Our method, clients at Midwest U.S. jails and prisons participated in the OTTIS program for at least 6 weeks to develop a plan for reentry goals and engage in skilled OT interventions. We performed records reviews to determine the general characteristics of clients, if they completed pre-release services while in jail or prison, and if they engaged post-release. Descriptive statistics and qualitative coding with thematic analysis were used to summarize findings. So here are our results. Our demographics, we had 142 clients completed an initial intake with an OT. And this is from the time frame of January 2017 to July 2021. So 79.6% were recruited from jails, 54.2% of clients were classified as male. Kind of going into the services, 59.9% completed pre-release OTTIS services, so whether that was pre-release in jail or prison. And of those 59%, 64.7% continued engagement post-release from jail or prison. And 43.7% had continued engagement with OTTIS upon reentry. So more than just one contact with the OT after being reintegrated into society. And then of those 142 initial, 19.7% were not released yet at the time of July 2021. 27% were still serving time or were sent to other facilities, out of state or wherever we couldn't serve them, and 8.2% did not engage for other reasons. And then kind of going into some of just the lessons learned after doing this program for 4.5 years. So the first one is referral sources, which is very important because like Karen said, we are not a standalone. We have to have a team of people approaching this work with us. So we have used the Public Defender's Office, St. Louis City Jail, MacArthur Justice, and Probation and Parole is another big referral source. And we've also just used other community resources in the St. Louis area to help us get more clients and help us serve more people. All right, and then client engagement. Obviously, that's a big one. That's the core of what we do as OTs. So client engagement, when someone is pre-release, so in the jail or the prison. In the jail, we were doing groups for 6 weeks, I believe. So once a week, and then in the prison, it was typically a phone call, and we would do 2 phone calls a month, 3 months prior to their release. And then after they release, we offer many different types of engagement to kind of keep that client engagement up. So we would do phone calls, or we offer in-person meetings, or Zoom calls, which is kind of a new one after COVID. And just kind of doing anything we can to keep that engagement up. So it's really important to send client text messages of reminders that we're gonna have an appointment tomorrow, or here's something we said we were gonna work on in our last session. How has that been going in this past week? And then this here is a picture of one of our clients that graduated our program last May. Yes. And I will pass it back over to Lisa.
Okay, awesome. Okay, thanks Mackenzie for giving that overview. And I want to go back just one. This client is doing amazing. So this client was sentenced as a juvenile to life without the option of parole, was sent to prison when he was like maybe 15, 16, 17 years old, and then served 30 years in prison. And so when he learned about our program, it was actually through a mitigation specialist, an attorney through the Missouri Public Defender's Office. And she learned about OT. She and I were just at a little function for our kids who are teenagers in high school. And I told her about OT. And she said, oh my gosh, I have these clients you have to meet, you have to work with them. So at any point in time, if you can talk about occupational therapy and promote that and say what you do and say how it is distinct and how it can help others, it's amazing that that one conversation literally launched us being able to do work with 26 individuals sentenced to life without the option of parole. So it's amazing how these things can go. So this individual also did Toastmasters while in prison, was very driven, not knowing he would ever be released. Very driven to do restorative justice activities, and now is an over-the-road truck driver. Okay, so I'm gonna touch on community partners. So Mackenzie talked about referral sources. I gave you a little hint about how do we find referral sources through those mitigation specialists, through MacArthur Justice, who are seeking OTs now to do some of this pre and post-release work. But we also have criminology and criminal justice colleagues at St. Louis University and beyond that we collaborate with. And we ask them questions because we're not criminal justice experts by any way, shape, or form, right? So we ask them, how should we go about this? When we were recruiting people into the jail program, what sort of sentences or what sort of charges should we look at when trying to recruit people in? Because this was a very quick 6-week program. So we're not going to be able to bring in someone who has a really high felony charge, and I don't even know the numbers of those, but if it was a super serious crime, that would not be a good fit because they're gonna go on to a long series of hearings and court cases and things. So they're not gonna be released anytime soon. to understand how to manage their home, how to access transportation, how to use the bus system, and those skills that are needed far beyond the case management of getting that service. We have also worked with probation and parole officers, and they like us to be a liaison. We help support their clients. They don't want their clients to be rearrested. They want them to stay out in the community. So we help them in that way as well. Family and community medicine has been huge. One of our partners, Dr. Jen Bellow, she does work on preconception health. And I was able to work with her with our Department of Corrections. She did focus groups or interviews with men incarcerated, talking about their role in terms of their influence of mothers who are having babies, and what was their role as a substance abuser in that case, because we know that babies are being born addicted to drugs. How do we stop that? So OT can work throughout the lifespan, literally, and work with others to do that. So that's our community partners. And then the team approach is huge. I'm the program developer in terms of Karen is our visionary. She's our mentor. She has great experience and knowledge and informs our program. I take the information. I'm a program designer, developer, and evaluator. So I do the research end. And then Mackenzie and Christine and our whole team, they do the actual work. And yes, I help out every once in a while, but for the most part, they're doing boots on the ground. Now, when we first started, Karen and I, we did the initial evaluations and things. So we understood how to do this. That's how we learned how to design it. But what I've always said is, as much as possible, we need to be paid to do this work. And so when we started working with those attorneys, we started asking them, hey, you know, if they had a psychological eval needed for a client, would that psychologist get paid? If they had some other special evaluation, would that person get paid? Absolutely, and they get paid very well. So we need to be asking to be reimbursed for our services, and that's something that we did, and Karen did when we talked with the jail facility. We were funded for 5 straight years to have a full-time funded occupational therapy in the city of St. Louis jail. And then with the mitigation specialists and learning about the OT evaluations for pre-release, we had attorney partners that would pay us just like they would for a psych eval. They did that for OT. And what we developed was a full reentry plan. 20 pages of our full OT assessments, and then what do we feel that client needs to be living independently or with OT support out in the community. And that was our report that the attorney sent directly to the probation and parole board. And that board determined whether or not that person should be released. Now, our report didn't say yes or no, we feel they should be released. It was only if that person is released, this is what we feel they need to be supported in the community. Okay, I could go on forever. So, conclusion. So this follow-up to our 1-year process evaluation. The 1-year process eval is that paper that Mackenzie showed, the jail process evaluation. And it shows that, you know, she said we had 60% of people finish the pre-release program. That means 40% didn't. That means there's challenges there to do that. She also said that, you know, 20% were still being held in the facility. You know, we can't work against, you know, just the rules of the system. We have to do what we can with what we've got. So we've understood many lessons learned, and so that's what we've shared with you today. That client participation and engagement, those community partners, the way that our team does this. And we've built out this approach with many fieldwork students, capstone students. The next published paper on this will be our impact evaluation that a capstone student from a different university, from University of South Dakota, just spent her last 16 weeks on, and we're submitting that to AJOT here this coming week. So it takes a village, and it takes people totally motivated and passionate about this work, because we're starting from almost scratch to do this. So those are some of our conclusions, and we did have a justice-based occupational therapy network meeting yesterday. This is just a very informal network of people very engaged and excited and wanting to know more about this work. It's very informal. There's Facebook, Instagram. you're welcome to join us and just move with the conversation that's going on there. So that's the scam code to JBot. And then we also do have continuing education. We've had many people who ask us, how do you do OTTIS? How do you do this? And we're just busy doing OTTIS. Unfortunately, we don't have as much time as we'd like to train everyone to do this. So we've got a couple of continuing education opportunities. And one is just a mini one on AOTA's website. And it's just talking about our role and how can we do this work. And then online through OTTIS, we do have a full, I bet it's 15 CEs, 20 CEs. I mean, maybe it says it on here. But it's a full program that our practitioners have developed, sharing everything from the forms they use, the process they use, and then I share our program evaluation. Karen shares her model, and it's basically everything that we train our practitioners on to do the work. So that's there, and just so you know, all the proceeds from that go directly back to the program. So St. Louis University doesn't take that money. It literally goes to, if we're doing groups with clients and we actually want to buy food or do something, it goes to that money from that continuing ed. Okay, so hopefully we have time for some questions, and I'll put it back. I see people looking for scan codes and stuff. I can put that up there and move those as well. So any questions? Yes, in the back.
Do you find that your clients have issues with mental illness, and how do you work that into your program?
Yeah, absolutely. I can start. So mental health challenges are kind of the core things, and especially if someone's been in prison for 30 years, absolutely, we're checking that box right away. Yes, trauma, violence, yes, they've been exposed, and then there's those detrimental effects. So that's the core, and doing mental health treatment and partnering with community partners who can provide inpatient or outpatient services are definitely things. So I don't know, Mackenzie, if you have any things you want to say about like direct mental health.
So a lot of our clients do have serious mental illness, and typically what we do is we connect them with community resources that can further support those needs. But kind of in the meantime, we do just kind of some exercises or a WRAP, which is a wellness recovery action plan. So it's just, we're kind of walking through them with it. These are some of the coping skills you can use, and what would you do in this situation? How can you kind of walk yourself through that? That's kind of what we'll do in the meantime, and then just talking through it.
Yeah, kind of knowing their triggers, kind of knowing how are you feeling in the situation, and recognizing that, and knowing when they need help are key things. Now, if we could partner with community partners who are OTs, like immersed in mental health services, we would absolutely be partnering in that way too.
If I could just comment here, some of our children are adopted. Our adopted son is still incarcerated, 28 years. But when we got him, we learned that, there was very probable substance use and abuse during pregnancy, and then violence experienced in the first 4 years of his life. So, it can be a lifelong, back to what Lisa said earlier, prenatal through the lifespan, it's what you're dealing with this population for some individuals, not all.
Right. Other questions? Yeah, I see you in the back. Sorry.
This is kind of an ignorant question, I think, but you said you try to avoid people with significant felonies, and then you just talked about this gentleman, 30 years without parole.
Great point.
Like, how did that go? Did your program help him?
Yeah, it's basically like we have 3 different programs in one. So the first one we talked about was the jail program. That's where the city paid for full-time OT to be in the jail. And so for that referral line, we had to focus on who could we see during those 6 weeks, who had the potential to go home. And then the second one was the JL WAP program with those juveniles sentenced to life without the option of parole. That was totally separate, and we actually had separate OTs working on each program. So yeah, great point. Yeah. Yes?
I have more of a comment. So I'm very passionate about this work. I actually think I just cited your article in my micro advocacy assignment for class, which is great. But so I've worked in reentry. My uncle actually was incarcerated for on and off for 20 years and started a program in Rhode Island called the Reentry Campus Program. So we kind of focused on reentry and then providing post-secondary education within the prison system, and then upon release, and then also connecting with other services. And as I've progressed in my OT education, it's opened my eyes on how important OT is in that population. So I think that this is just such a great start in program, and I would love to somehow get involved and continue also.
Awesome, yeah. I do have cards up here and there's some handouts up front too. And I'll just put this back on this process evaluation that you might have been referring to. But a key partner has been higher education as well. Dr. Barney was the interim director of the prison education program for St. Louis University that included both staff and people incarcerated in the prison system. And we've tried partnering with that program a lot because there are different models. One model is that higher education is the key, and that's gonna support that person throughout, giving them those learning tools and skills. However, we found that they still need skilled, occupation-based support, and so we're always trying to advocate for that.
The higher education opportunity is huge. To a person, these individuals would say they were transformed by having that opportunity. And they've been, I think, primarily the ones that I'm still in contact with are successful. They're employed, they bought homes, they're law-abiding. So, higher education. I'm all for any institution of higher ed that is near a prison should be offering a program. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you all for your questions and attention here.